Welcome back to another episode of the XRP podcast. Today, I've got a special guest with me, and that, of course, is Sal Gilbertie. How are you, Sal?
I'm well, Paul. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to dive into the topic of use case for the XRP ledger, but also how things are applying to the markets, maybe through the ETF component, obviously through some legislation that is now working its way through DC in the Clarity Act. We're going to jump into all of that with Sal. You guys don't want to miss it. So Sal, let's get into it today. First of all, give me an update of where Teucrium is. The last time we had you on, you guys were just getting rolling. Give me an understanding of where you guys are today.
Sure. I think the last time we were on, we had just launched the XRP Fund.
Yep.
And that did really well. It's had amazing inflows. I think well over $500 million in inflows over time. But remember, it's a leveraged fund, so it resets every day. And unless XRP is going up, every day, sideways or down, that fund is for people who want accelerated returns in what they think is going to be an up market. And so
explain that a little bit for our investors. Sometimes they don't understand the leverage fund model and how it works. For an average investor that's just now hearing, oh, XRP ETFs, this is a big deal, I should get in one. Explain how yours works.
Sure. If you're going to buy and hold, if you're in XRP for the long term, you should probably buy an unleveraged ETF. And there's one out there, and there will be several more over the next couple of weeks. And so that's what you should do. Buy and hold. You should not use leverage at all. Leverage is for someone looking to juice their returns in assets.
Yep.
And it resets every day. So the purpose of the fund is to give you as close as possible to twice the daily return of XRP's price each day. So it starts over again each day, which in simple layman's terms means unless it's going up, you lose money. The fund will lose money. The fund will go down in value in a sideways market or in a down market. It will go up in value in an up market, and that's it. So in 2 out of 3 market scenarios using a leveraged fund, you will likely lose money. And so, that needs to be your selection. Look carefully, understand what you're buying. If you just want to buy and hold XRP, a leveraged fund is not for you, or any other asset.
So it's really built on timing in the market.
That's correct. If you think an uptrend is coming, you might want to consider leverage, whatever asset you're looking at. But if you think that things are going to go sideways or down, you don't want to go near a leverage problem.
Right. Sal, when you look at the ETF broader landscape, now that we're seeing the exposure with Canary Capital, their launch last week, over the top, now the number one ETF for 2025 in terms of volume and also the activity, do you think this is going to give enough exposure to TradFi investors? Because there's a lot of people in the S&P 500 looking at specific stocks that maybe they're buying baskets already in the tech space. Do you think that's going to drive their interest in ETFs, especially around XRP?
I do. I think that the XRP ETFs are the next round coming out to give attention to DeFi. XRP is a unique asset, but what it does is opens up the category, I think. I think you're exactly right. And I do think the next thing coming are baskets. I think crypto baskets, that people will want that exposure, and all kinds of indexes and baskets are going to come out. And I think that's the more traditional asset allocators are going to migrate towards those things over the next few years.
Before we dive into some of the news that I think is directing the market right now, I want to get your thesis. The last time, again, we had a conversation, we talked a little bit about the use cases of XRP. The use cases now have quite substantially changed with all the announcements from Ripple at Swell. New investment rounds now valuing the company upwards of $40 billion. We've got all sorts of assets that have now been sucked up by Ripple. What does this do for your thesis in terms of the use case of the ledger, the validation of XRP, and the company Ripple?
Well, I think it's in reverse. I think it's a complete validation of Ripple and their plan. And that was to basically change the way that money moves around. And so they built their ledger, and they have Ripple Net that's moving money around in an ISO20022 compliant way. And most banks are using that already. It gets turned off November 22nd, but all that means is people using the old system will get penalized or have mistakes. The new system is being used right now. RippleNet, because they were on the ISO standards board, I think from the beginning, they have an inherent advantage in that they built their entire structure around the compliance. Now, that doesn't mean people have to use it. They don't have to use the RippleNet network, but it's easier for banks to attach onto, is my understanding. And banks that are looking for rails to be ISO compliant, I think the RippleNet network, by all intents and purposes and everything you see and read and hear, it's an easy network. You don't have to rewrite your entire TradFi to DeFi to get on that and be ISO compliant. So it has a distinct leg up right there. No question about it. As far as XRP use,
yeah, go ahead.
That, you don't have to use XRP to use RippleNet. So I think most people are using RippleNet in a more traditional way, just for the information to flow more accurately. But I think look at the Clarity Act is everything, Paul, and I know you want to get there. But once we do get more clarity, that's, I think, going to be really good for the XRP use case, because people won't be afraid to hold XRP or any token on their balance sheet. They will have literally clarity. It's an aptly named act. And once that passes, I think that's an enormous hurdle and milestone in the entire blockchain, crypto and DeFi community.
There's some interesting movements right now that are happening. We saw, the Saudis came in. They obviously met up here with Trump. And if you look back and look at basically SAB, which is the Saudi British bank, they were one of the first banks to join RippleNet. And it's interesting that they are now tied into the administration at the same time in which Saudi is trying to create a technological, footprint, and also at the same time in which we're getting a lot more clarity around Ripple as a company, because this is as you just mentioned, the Clarity Act is going to open up one of the biggest blockchain companies in the United States, maybe as a first mover leader. Do you think that Ripple could be in a position, kind of in the catbird seat, so to speak, because they are a US-based company, well respected by the administration and a lot of Wall Street now, clearly that is shown just with the ETF activity, that possibly could be organizing a bigger and broader integration of what they've been building along, meaning the Saudis, possibly the EU, maybe something in Southeast Asia?
I think definitely. The Ripple team, and I don't speak for them, okay? But the Ripple team is so professional, and I do think that their plan of top to bottom integration in the DeFi system is unbelievable. And it's really well disciplined in terms of look at the acquisitions they made. Okay. Mm-hmm. They, in essence, have an entire financial ecosystem for moving money or any kind of assets around on the blockchain. So once the Clarity Act comes and everybody jumps in, they're so well positioned to make their own ecosystem work in the DeFi world and on the blockchain to be literally an example of what can actually happen in real world time, real world use. That's what they've built. And it's really, really impressive. I think it speaks more for Ripple itself than for XRP, honestly. XRP adoption is a different thing than the Ripple ecosystem being built out. And one thing of note that I think is actually more important for Ripple than even the Clarity Act, and that is if they get a banking license.
Oh, for sure. OCC compliance, huge.
Look, if they're given that the biggest, I think, issue with XRP's price appreciation or lack thereof for some people, depending on what your time horizon is the overhead supply that's enormous. Okay. Mm-hmm. But if Ripple's granted a banking license, and I'm Ripple, and again, I don't speak for them, but if I'm them, I'm going to stop selling. I want a highly capitalized bank with the amount of tokens that they hold right now in XRP at a $2 price. They're a top 50 bank in terms of balance sheet market capitalization. They could be a top 20 bank with XRP returning to the mid threes, 320 to 350 value. And they could be literally the top bank in the world with XRP, say, tripling in price from here. Why would you jeopardize that? So the biggest thing to remove the overhead supply is Ripple getting a banking license. I don't know what they'll do. I have no inside information. I do not speak for them. But why would you sell the thing that is capitalizing your bank? They can be a JP Morgan rival, literally, in terms of market capitalization with a little bit of appreciation next up.
Well, and if you look at just some of the moves that have been made here just this year, and I'll go back to the Saudi prince and what they had done in May. And that was, they led, I think it was 120 plus million investing round with Vivopower. Vivopower, one of the XRP based, digital asset treasuries with Ripple and with XRP. And I think the fact that you have a Ripple board member, Adam Trademan, I think, was joining as the chairman, as the board of advisors for that. there's just some interesting things happening globally from a macro standpoint that involve Ripple more extensively than I've seen any other blockchain out there really being involved, obviously with XRP at the center of this. Do you think Brad's statement, because this is one thing that I think a lot of XRP holders are worried about, and that is the evolution of Ripple dumping on the market. You think his statement recently prior to Swell, where he said, XRP is at the center of everything we do. Do you think that settled the market?
I'm not sure. It may have. I think that, Brad's messaging, in my mind, is very clear. They are building literally I said it before, a JP Morgan rival. Once they get their banking license, they're going to be incredibly well capitalized. Why would they want to sell XRP? They're going to hold on to that. As it goes up in value, they could sell some clearly. Sure. I just think that Ripple is a machine. It is a highly disciplined team that is, they don't all have to agree on things, and some of them leave to go here or go there. They sure all leave and go somewhere related. So whether it's a master plan, or more likely it's really creative people that work as a team, and they all have different paths that their lives take them on, but they stay in the ecosystem, and they're creating a bigger ecosystem, a more robust ecosystem. I just think Ripple is at the center of the universe. And so Brad says XRP, he's being modest. It's Ripple.
It's Ripple. Well, and I look at it this way. When you think about the adoption curves that we have seen happen in really just 12 months, since last November when Trump's administration took office, the speed in which we have seen movement in the crypto market, we have never seen anything like it in my, 10 years of working in this area. And if you look at what's happening now, I want to share this with you. This, of course, is a U.S. state approving the first Bitcoin-backed municipal bond in the U.S. Do you think that could change maybe in terms of digital asset? This is New Hampshire. Most likely we'll see Texas or Florida maybe jump into this side of things. But do you think we could see XRP-backed municipal bonds in the future?
No idea. I think Bitcoin obviously is the natural for people if they want to branch out into it. Yeah. I think, look at the volatility. Volatility in Bitcoin is still pretty big, but it is declining rapidly. So to your point, since Trump was elected, we have a crypto-friendly administration, which is completely different than a crypto antagonistic administration. Even if the Trump administration were neutral, we'd have this immense progress, but they're not neutral. They clearly are crypto friendly. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think that as more money comes in, as the ETFs comes in, as the treasury companies come in, and you see that supply taken off the market of the XRP tokens, in terms of it's in buy and hold. It doesn't stay off the market forever. People buy and sell it as per their needs. But I think these natural, crypto winter, and people saying it's early Black Friday for crypto last week or a couple of weeks ago, all that is nice stuff and buzz for the internet. But the bottom line is you're up hundreds of % in a year in terms of asset values here. Yep. A 30 or 50% pullback is literally nothing. It's natural. The markets are maturing. The volatility will strip out. It won't go away completely, and they'll still remain, relatively volatile assets, I think, for quite some time. But as these things are used in the financial world stably, okay, not just for stable coins, but I get that as crypto is used in treasuries to back bonds, things like that, there's no question the whole asset class will become more stable, less volatile, and a more attractive investment for even traditional investors. And that's coming. It just takes longer than people think. I think their time horizon needs to stretch out a bit.
Yeah. It is something that, we talk about on the channel quite a bit, is that time horizons for a lot of people are quite different. And if you look at just the performances of what we've seen in, the digital asset side of thing, outside of just Bitcoin, you could look at Ethereum, Solana, XRP, etc. These kind of pullbacks are normal and in most cases very healthy as markets correct. But I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, well, I'm in this long term, but I'm trying to understand because utility, I still believe utility will be the Trump factor. I mean it as a more analysis of this, the Trump factor of how certain blockchains will do really well. The XRP ledger, we've had several of the guys on that are builders in this ecosystem. I've never been more bullish because I was somewhat skeptical of the XRP ledger in the beginning. I know last year was I don't remember, but I think it was over 300 or 400% growth in terms of active accounts. And they had 2 million daily transactions. So that has fallen off some. But what is your thought about the ledger? Do you feel like we're going to get a killer app and more devs coming into this ecosystem?
Yes, I think undoubtedly, but I don't think that that's the next impetus for XRP popularity.
Okay.
I think there's no question it's Clarity Act and Ripple's banking
Finance.
Yeah. After that, the build out of the ledger, there's so many ledgers to choose from. So, great. XPRL is great, but that doesn't mean, there are thousands of developers and programmers out there using dozens of different really good ledgers. There are people building their own ledgers, internally. And so there's no way I don't think XPRL is going to dominate in terms of ledger activity, any other ledger. I think it's useful. I think it'll build out, but no question for Ripple, for XRP, the Clarity Act and a banking license, that's what they built the company for. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, you can use the ledger. You can use it for all kinds of things. And real world asset adoption into tokenization, that is going to utilize that ledger a lot. But they're not the only ones. And I think, Brad Garlinghouse is very open in saying as the whole ecosystem grows, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
So I think people have to be open to that. You can be XRPL centric, but that doesn't serve your purpose very well. I think developers will use what's best for them, and XRP in the ledger will be good for a lot of people, but that's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, it will take some time. Well, and I think in general, the infrastructure side of things, which is really what Ripple has been building on, their connection into the global finance system, what this is going to look like with a banking license is I think the real, trigger point that we will see major moves in the market for sure. What do you make of the current status where Bitcoin is? Because Bitcoin obviously drives a lot of the market sentiment, all-time high, 126K in October. We have the November pullback now down to 89,000 and ranging at around, 92. Do you feel like there has been just a impetus of older wallets finally just saying, I'm going to take some profits, or is there something greater working here?
I think it's three things. I think the older wallets taking profits are putting that supply on that people didn't kind of expect. And it does, some people think that those sleepy wallets are going to stay sleepy forever because people are so confident in Bitcoin just going up all the time. That may be true, but look, we all get older. You spend your money before you die. Eventually, it's been a long time. And so I think seeing a wallet wake up and people take some cash off the table is just a natural thing. I don't think people should worry about that. That's one. Another thing is natural ebbs and flows. We've already talked about that. Market volatility. That's a big deal. And the other is the animal spirits in the market, if you okay. I think the Bitcoin market will go for Michael Saylor's average acquisition price just to see what happens. I truly believe that. I've been in markets for over 40 years. And they go for the big numbers. How it happens, I don't know. Why it happens, I don't know, but it happens. And I think everybody thinks, that's going to be a horrible thing. I think it would be a great flush. And I think when it hits or even goes below Michael Saylor's average acquisition price, guess what? Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's
interesting.
It doesn't matter. And so what matters most in this market is and I'll just say it, the ridiculous amounts of leverage that the crypto token exchanges can give to their players. They don't have a centralized clearinghouse. Each one of those exchanges that gives somebody a 10 to 1 or 100 to 1 leverage.
Yeah, there's some out there that are 500x.
They're putting themselves at risk. So I don't trust any exchange that does that. If they do that and they manage their risk improperly or don't do their diligence with their clients, it's over. That's right. And so I do think that you got to go more toward TradFi in terms of the regulation and the stabilization of markets. And commodities markets, the clearinghouses have mechanisms and waterfall mechanisms where the brokers, all the participants backstop a failure. That is not the case in crypto exchanges. You start giving 100 to 1 and 500 to 1 leverage, you are going to blow up at some point. There's no question about it. And so I think that adds to a lot of volatility here.
Well, we saw it here, just last month. I mean, this is the kind of liquidity events that we've kind of anticipated, and we had one. A lot of people are still believing that there were, I think it was Tom Lee who was talking about, he felt that there were still market makers hurting from that position. And that's why we're still seeing a little bit of a laggard move, because obviously Tom is very bullish into the end of the year for both Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc. It's interesting because you got to remember, this was like $1 trillion in market cap that was erased almost immediately. Now, granted, that's not anything like the dot-bomb era and, what we saw in 2008. But for crypto, that was a big deal. You were going from 4.2 or 3 down to 3.2 in literally just a short period of time. So that's a kind of volatility shakeup that definitely can start to correct the market for sure. Even though we are seeing a lot of people saying Wall Street is basically doing their best to bring more traditional finance into the game. Do you feel like that is where this cycle is right now? When you think about all the things, previous cycles before you've seen this, are we at that maturity stage for crypto? Or do you think it's still years to come?
Yeah, I think you're getting more mature every day. I think that these pullbacks are part of the maturation process, if you will. And I think it's going to take a long time for traditional finance, for registered investment advisors. I mean,
right. Yeah.
You still have people that aren't even going into Bitcoin. Okay. Yeah. That said, you've got Bitcoin ETFs that are above 100 billion. So the money's flowing in. The adoption isn't even close to the saturation point.
I would agree.
We're still in a nascent industry, bottom line. And let's not underestimate the elimination of Nostro Vostro accounts.
Yep.
Once the blockchain takes complete effect, that is going to free up, and that will be the main driver for banks to move away from TradFi. That's going to free up so much capital and be so good for the global economy. I've said that before, but there's so much money locked up just sitting idly.
Exactly.
That can benefit literally the blockchain is going to benefit the entire world just from that one point, freeing up all that.
Speed to market, man. It's speed to market. I did a speech or a little event for a group of RIAs, and it was about digital assets in general, obviously. And I was surprised, to your point, we did a show of hands. I was surprised at how few had actually even considered Bitcoin. I talk, and sometimes you get in that ecosystem and that bubble, understanding digital assets, and we see it every day and the drive of it. But I think a lot of traditional investors, family offices, trusts, et cetera, that they haven't even moved on it just yet.
No question. I think Matt Hogan over at Bitwise, yeah. I think Rick Edelman over at Digital Asset Group that he's running for education. I think that these people are stressing how it hasn't been adopted yet. And I think Rick Edelman's group is really helping to educate RIAs. Again, we're just at the beginning. We're at the tip of the iceberg here. I had one person say to me at Ripple Swell, I was fortunate enough to be invited to that and attend. And one programmer who knows, he said to me, look, this is literally in the earliest stages of adoption.
No,
like when the internet developed the cloud, first came the rails and then the cloud developed around it. And he said, that's where we are. People have no idea how much bigger this entire ecosystem will be 15 years from now. And that's how people have to think about this. This is a seismic shift in financial markets and how they operate. No question.
Sal, we have to talk about the ETF outflows that we've seen in Bitcoin. BlackRock, Grayscale, Bitwise, Fidelity, everybody's leading in terms of outflows right now. And when you look at that, is this alarming at all to you based on what you know of Wall Street, how Wall Street moves, especially with an asset that has been up so much this year like the Bitcoin ETFs?
Not at all. And in fact, I've not done the study, but I think if we calculate the percentage of outflows versus inflows versus...
Oh, it's still up for the year, for sure.
It's still way up for the year. What I'm saying is I think that inflow percentage is still... The outflow is going to be much less than the percentage pullback in price. And all that means is there are a few weak players. There are people that just don't want to ride an asset down. Some people probably sold, their Bitcoin thinking it's going to go down and I'll buy it again at a lower price and I'll buy more. I don't think it signifies anything but a maturing market. I hold nothing in those outflows. The outflows mean nothing. From those
so nobody should even worry about that. This is typical market behavior.
Not always.
Yeah, just understand this is, I'll bring this chart up just so people can kind of see it, because I think for some people it's probably a little bit alarming, in the sense of where outflows, the net outflow, right? This is November 17th, right now, 447 million. But if you look at the last week, 416, 598 on the last month, last 3 month, 556 mil. But strongest month was 11 billion.
Yeah. It's not even worth thinking about, really. Yeah. This is not. In fact, when you look at it that way, it's really healthy. These markets are basically.
Well, you can see it right there.
Yeah.
Those months right there, absolutely killed for
astounding. And it's. In fact, I would take that as a healthy signal. The fact that there is so little outflow compared to the inflows, this is a stable, healthy market with normal volatility. And I'll just say it, declining volatility over time. That's what we'll see.
Well, this is a thing that we're talking quite a bit about in terms of analysts, because the real question is, has Bitcoin maybe finally come into the range that is going to be less volatile, both on its retracement in bear markets and in its, ascension in bull markets? Do you think we're at that point yet?
Yeah, I think we are. I'm not sure there's any, the mystical switch that gets flipped and people think, oh my goodness, that causes something to happen. I do think that Bitcoin now starting to correlate with the broader markets, all of crypto is. That's a sign of maturity. It's also a sign that, once things start to correlate, that is a little bit less of an advantage for good portfolio allocators. But look, it's a maturing market that's not even near its apex, not even near its apex.
Yeah, I think this is the scenario that we are facing right now. And with all of the things that are happening around the macroeconomic side, I have to ask you about the Fed and the likelihood of a December rate cut. What's your feeling? I'm kind of getting mixed estimations as to whether we're going to get a pause or we're going to get a rate cut. Where do you guys stand?
I think we stand with another cut. I think they do need one. I also think that their tools are limited. Long-term interest rates are just going to keep going up. They can't really affect them. It's a different attitude with the China. The Japanese carry trade is reversing, and that's a lot of money. People are really worried about that. I'm not so much, because I think that just, again, Nostro Vostro accounts being freed up, that amount of money dwarfs whatever's going to be unwound in the Japanese trade. Now, they may not sink in terms of their timing. So we may see some negative market effects temporarily, but it will be temporary. These markets are generally healthy markets. There's a lot more liquidity coming. The whole world is changing because of blockchain. It's changing for the better.
Yeah. Do you feel that's what we're seeing in stablecoins, especially with the offshoring of things like USDC? You could put even RLUSD in this basket. PYUSD, which is PayPal stablecoin, absolutely, exploding over some of the yields they're providing. And this exportation of the US dollar globally now, do you think that helps prop up the securities side to kind of reverse what we're seeing in the possibility of reverse carry trade out of Japan?
I think it does. I also think, stable coins they're going to get backing from Washington because they just go in and they buy government paper. That's what they do.
Government paper.
And so, that alone is a counterpoint to higher interest rates. Hopefully, I think the market would have higher interest rates if it weren't for stablecoin dollars that are going to flow into U.S. paper. I think.
Are you at all worried that we're just shifting where the paper is held?
Yeah, of course.
Because right now it seems like it's whack-a-mole. You've got all of this paper moving into places like Circle, what eventually will be Ripple with RLUSD, and Tether even with onshoring, what's happening now with USAT. So is this just moving the paper around to new entities?
Yes, it is. And it's supporting the fiat currency ecosystem. And
are you learning about this?
Over long periods of time, fiat currency goes down. That's why we're all in this. That's why we like crypto. It's why we like the blockchain. Fiat currency is a necessary evil, if you will. I don't want to call it evil, but look, fiat currency destroys itself over time. Whether it's 25 years or 250 years, it all goes down. And so that's why we're here. That's why we all believe in crypto. That's why we all have our favorite tokens to park our money in, or that's why gold is going higher.
Yeah.
For fiat currency declines in value all the time and continues doing so and will continue to.
Well, the acceleration of gold is the one thing to watch right now. This is the most volatile I've ever seen it in my lifetime in terms of the short period of time in which it's moved like this. When you consider that and you consider everything else that's happening around the stablecoin side of things, and then what's happening with companies like JP Morgan, with JP Morgan eventually Coin, Citi just launched about them doing tokenized assets to interbank. What does that look like? Because I think that is something that is not it's tokenization and it works on the blockchain, but it's not really crypto. Do you think that the population at large will go that direction? Would I hold JP Morgan coin in my JP Morgan account, or would I hold something else like Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP?
Look, the only reason to hold a JP Morgan coin or a Franklin Templeton coin or anybody that's got their own coin is using it is because you got to move things around inside their stuff. That's the only reason. Those things are going to be stable coins. That they're not they're a totally different class. They're just used to make the rails workable. Everybody in the XRP world hopes that they'll use XRP and not develop their own token. But people will. I think it depends on the amount of investment they want to make. I think Ripple and its rails are set up for easy use by a lot of banks and a lot of institutions, and it will be used by them. And then I think there are the behemoth players that by nature are going to build their own internal rails, have their own internal token, and that's fine too. The whole ecosystem is going to build, but it's going to be more efficient. And again, Nostro Vostro going away opens up a stunning amount of capital for the whole world to use.
Well, and to your point there, internal tokens versus when we do see the interbank transfers, the cross borders, all that. That's where RLUSD could really become a power player if positioned correctly. And now with G Treasury and many of the other acquisitions by Ripple, this could become reality fast, especially with clarity and all that. So it just seems like everything is coming to a head at the same time.
I think you outlined in a nutshell Ripple's strategy.
Timing.
It's been brilliant execution.
Yeah.
A very disciplined, intelligent execution. I think Ripple, it just sits on the top of the heap, and they will once the last few things are in place. There's no switch being flipped. Yeah. There's a plan that's just coming to fruition. There's no steps that's being flipped.
I want to get this last question to you. Very favorable administration. You've got Atkins leading out the SEC, which I think is yet to really get his full force underway. But we also have the midterms coming up in a year, and that's pretty tight now. Okay. Does much of this get unwound if we see an administration shift in DC next year?
I don't think it gets unwound. I think if the Republicans lose the midterms, I think that momentum gets inhibited a bit. And I think that the stuff that matters for us in the DeFi world, is that it all gets passed before those midterms take place. Then it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, for sure. Sal Gilbertie coming in from Teucrium. I'll drop some links down in the description and show you guys the website to where you can go visit and learn a little bit more about what they are doing. Sal, thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. It's always fun.
Yeah, it's been a good one. You guys know what to do. Like and subscribe. Make sure and share this with others out there who are trying to learn about digital assets, what's happening in the XRP ecosystem. We'll catch you next time right here on the XRP podcast. Take care.